It's like looking at the Norseman lunar belt, 1,600 kilometres.
Yeah.
God knows how many mines and different commodities that you got there.
Yeah.
I've always said when you've got such a massive system, the differences is going to be so. It's like having looking at the world population, right? How different are we everywhere? Even within the same family, we have 3 kids and they're all different. So in terms of geology, you may have enrichment of one commodity over the other, and the reason why one's got out more than the other. It's that what I like about these kind of things. Obviously, money's been spent, so now we can go and look at a map and go, oh, geez, you got 3 all these deposits. Geez, the endowment must be there, and where there's smoke, there's fire in some respect. In terms of your projects itself, I can see that you can see those grades, 0.3% nickel and things like that. Is there, it's in terms of nickel itself, are you seeing more one style as opposed to the other within your own projects itself already?
Within the Fraser Range, the style of nickel mineralisation is quite consistent. It's a magmatic nickel style.
Yep.
And what that means, it's nickel that has been, it originally starts life as part of a magma deep within the surface of the Earth. Yep. But it crystallises without reaching the surface of the Earth. So that means that the deposit itself is formed at depth, anywhere between 4 and 12 kilometres, perhaps deeper, and then it moves over time, it's pushed to the surface of the Earth. So that style of mineralisation is different to the typical style within Western Australia, which is associated with volcanic lava flows. So the nickel mineralisation in the Fraser Range is quite consistent, but is very sparsely distributed. And talking about the population as you did before, and one of the parallels between geology and population, just a general population of people, might be that the cluster effect. So people tend to live in highly densely populated areas, and they cluster in specialties. And the similar thing could be said about metal distribution as well. It occurs in clusters, and the type of metal and mineralisation is typically pretty consistent within that cluster. So if we're looking at the Fraser Range as a cluster of potential nickel deposits, then the mineralisation within those nickel deposits is very consistent along strike. And that's one of the great things about what we have so far, is that we know we have the same rock types as the other mineralisation so far discovered in the Fraser Range, and we have the same type of sulfides. So for us, that's a great encouragement to keep looking in that area.
Yep.
It's very rare in the Fraser Range to come across nickel sulfides. To my knowledge, there are only 4 places with the type of sulfide that we have at our Lantern prospect. One is the Nova mine, obviously, the Silver Knight deposit, which is owned by Mark Creasy. There's Legend Mining's Mawson prospect, and then there's Galileo's Lantern prospect. They're the only 4 known occurrences of nickel mineralisation of the tenor that we are seeing. And tenor is a fairly simple technical term for the amount of nickel within the sulfide itself. So there are such a thing as barren sulfides that don't contain any metal worth extracting. Our tenors are very high, which means that our sulfides contain a good amount of nickel. And if we were able to find more sulfide, we'd expect to see nickel grades which would be approaching economic material.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not, in my time, I haven't worked in the nickel industry. I've learned over the years talking to people like yourself who seem to be enlightening me, like in logarithm scale when we talk. So you're saying that I mean, those 4 projects, is it due to the fact there's a lack of discovery, or is it the fact that the style, the content, the nickel content percentage, and the way the nickel is occurring in your geology, is that unique to those 4 groups, or is this a lack of discovery that you haven't found, or other people have found similar?
Yeah, there's a lot of exploration work that's been going on, and there has been a number of occurrences of barren sulfides. So in a way, that would be described as a technical success. So for an explorer in the Fraser Range, the first step is to find the right rock types that have the ability to contain sulfides, and then to find the sulfides within those rocks, and then to find the sulfides that actually contain metal within those rocks. So getting to that end stage, finding some sulfides that have a good content of nickel is quite difficult and rare. And it's the first step towards developing economic intercepts, which would lead on to a resource and eventually into mining if successful. It's just a rare occurrence. That's how it operates. If we have a look at the Canadian examples, which see a similar strike length belt in the Thompson Nickel Belt, 150 to 200 kilometres long. There are over a dozen operating mines there, but they've been working that area for the last 50 years or so. So in the Fraser Range, we've been operating since 2012, since the discovery there at Nova. Give it another 10 years or so, and I think we'd see more discoveries made within the 150, 200 kilometre strike length of prospective ground in the Fraser Range. But ultimately, there's probably only going to be 10 or 12 mines. It's still going to be a substantial resource if those discoveries do eventuate. But there's just not a lot of mines. So to have 4 occurrences of nickel mineralisation in the Fraser Range, one of which is linked to an operating mine, another which is a resource, a third is a very good prospect of legends, and the fourth is our own early stage exploration result. I think that's not unusual.
I mean, I guess, you know, I saw your presentation, you can comparing to the Canadian ones, and the size that they have, like Voisey Bay and things like that. How is there any distinct difference between your nickel, your mineralization style, as to obviously, you know, with the Kambalda stuff, with this nickel sulfides or the Komatiite style, and then and what else you find along the sort of Norseman Wiluna belt mines? Are there any? Can you plot them on and see them differently?
Yeah, probably the biggest difference between Fraser Range nickel and Komatiite nickel, which has driven the nickel industry in Western Australia for the last 50 years, is the greater presence of copper. So in the Fraser Range, you get both nickel and, to a lesser extent, copper, whereas most of the other nickel mines in Western Australia are predominantly nickel. So there's a higher content of copper. Overall, it's a lower grade, but a much bigger resource. So with the higher grades of nickel found within, say, the Norseman Wiluna belt, you might be approaching 4 to 5% nickel, but much smaller resources of 1 to 2 million tonnes. In the Fraser Range at Nova, they've got around 14 million tonnes, nickel grades over 2%, and copper grades about 1%. So the overall value proposition is, to my mind, higher within the Fraser Range because they're larger scale ore bodies, and they have the byproduct of copper with them.
And they're able to extract the copper out?
Yeah, absolutely. So the extraction rates are very good. The rock is, in geological terms, it's known as high-grade metamorphic rock, which means that because it's formed so deep within the earth where those pressures are so large, the crystal structure is such that it makes extraction relatively easy, and it also makes for good mining conditions. So one of the things about Nova when they were developing the decline there is they're able to develop right to the base of the ore and then start mining backwards. So a lot of that development has been done. And when I was reading IGO's latest quarterly, I see that their cash costs for producing nickel from that mine are some of the lowest in the world. Which makes very profitable ore bodies in the Fraser Range.
Is your mineralisation from surface, or when did they start? In general, I mean.
So it depends on the geometry of any particular ore shoot or ore accumulation that you come across. So for us, our mineralisation starts from about 50 metres below surface, and that's because there's about 50 metres of cover on top. So that cover material is sandstone that's been laid down over the last 50 million years, and then beneath that is the target rock that we are chasing.
I guess always, you know, if you don't have that cover, we won't be sitting here talking about things.
That's it. It would have been discovered long ago. So it's because of the cover, and it's the next generation of deposits that we expect to see found and developed within Western Australia will be in those areas that have a little bit of cover on top. It's not prohibitive in terms of mining or exploration, but it means that there has been no exploration done there in the past.
I think in this day and age, you know, that kind of cover is it's actually a good thing because it allows you to talk about it because you've
a lot of potential up there.